So what is social psychology? Social psychology is the scientific study of the feelings, thoughts, and behaviors of individuals in social situations, such as why do people risk their lives to help others? Why do some do that? Why do some not? Why do some marriages flourish and others fail? How do orderly crowds turn into violent mobs? Why are people inclined to stereotype members of different groups? These are all types of questions we're going to answer from chapter to chapter throughout the semester. So there's a few different types of psychology that I don't want you to confuse with social psychology. The first one, social psychology, focuses on how social situations can influence the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of individuals. How the power of the situation, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, how who you're around, what situation you're in, what environment, what's going on around you can influence how you think, how you feel, and how you actually act. So that is social psychology. Personality psychology focuses on how differences between individuals can influence their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So this is differences between individuals. Cognitive psychology focuses on how people perceive, think about, and remember aspects of the world. And then sociology focuses on behaviors of communities and groups, not on individual behaviors. So that is one of probably the main difference between social psychology and sociology is it's a difference between individuals and groups or communities. Okay, so the power of the situation, like I just said, this is where the main situational influences on our behavior are the actions and sometimes even the mere presence of other people. So situational influences or people or just the presence of people doesn't even have to be you interacting with someone else, but the presence of someone else can make you act differently. So if we think about not going back to the to World War II in the 40s to Nazi Germany, I guarantee you that not all of the soldiers within the German army hated Jewish people, that they thought that they were wrong. But they were brainwashed or they were made to feel like they needed to do this because of the situation they were in, that they were not all horrible people, that it was the situation they were in. I'm sure that there are things that you think, oh, I would never do that, but then you're put into a situation and you end up doing it. And that is not any excuse for atrocious behavior by any means, but it's just the more you go through the semester, you'll see, whoa, there are so many things that add up to equal why I do what I do. It's not just what you think and believe. And we're going to get into that. Next, storming the Capitol back in January of 2021. We're actually going to hit on that pretty further on in the semester on how something like that can happen, even if you went there. If, say someone went to the Capitol just to protest, how it turned into something that was potentially violent and dangerous, how it went from a protest to that, even if you didn't mean for that to happen. If you want to go watch this YouTube video to kind of help further explain what the power of the situation is, you can look up or watch this video over the Milgram experiment. I highly encourage you to. I'm sure there's some short videos that you can watch over it, but it goes to show this was a study done a long time ago, I think in the 60s, that shows how when you're put into a situation, you may do things that you don't believe in. And it's pretty crazy. Okay, next, one key term that we're going to hit on over and over again is the fundamental attribution error. So situational factors govern people's actions more than most think. We think that people do things because they think it's right or that's what they should do. However, internal factors, such as the kind of person someone is, have much less influence than people assume they do. And so what you think is the cause of someone's actions are their dispositions. So someone's dispositions are their beliefs, their values, their personality traits, and their abilities that guide behavior. So you think that, oh, someone did something, you think that it's because of their dispositions, it's because of their beliefs, their values, their personality traits. However, according to the fundamental attribution error, um, there's a failure to recognize the importance of situational influences on behavior, together with the tendency to overemphasize the the importance of dispositions. So we overemphasize dispositions, these beliefs, these values, these personality traits, these abilities, and underemphasize situational influences whenever we look at someone's behavior. So social psychology encourages us to look at another person's situation in order to fully understand that person's behavior. Channel factors. These are situational circumstances that appear unimportant on the surface, but that can have strong effects on behavior, facilitating it, blocking it, or guiding it in a particular direction. That could be maybe someone giving some kind of subliminal messaging. That could be someone giving reminders on doing something. Okay, now let's make a plan and let's do it. That's going to increase the likelihood of someone doing something rather than just saying, go take out the trash. Now, if you say, when are you going to take out the trash? I'm going to take out the trash whenever I'm done putting on my shoes and putting away my backpack. Well, then, because they've made a plan, they're much more likely to put away the trash and not forget about it. So that's what a channel factor is. Next is the role of construals. Your construal is your interpretation of the world around you. So the role of construals is an interpretation or inferences about the stimuli or situations that people confront. Construal, that word construal or your construal processes is a key term we'll be using throughout this semester as well. So whenever we look at, if we're going to talk about construals, we're talking about our interpretation of the world. So I want you to look at this picture and I want you to tell me, or tell yourself, I guess, tell yourself, what do you see? What is this a picture of? Some people may say this is a picture, the first thing you see is a white triangle. Some people may see a blue triangle. Some people may see three blue circles or three blue Pac-Man, whatever. And all of those are correct. They're just different interpretations of the same picture. You're not right or wrong. It's just a different interpretation. Okay, schemas. Schemas are knowledge structures consisting of any organized body of stored information that is used to help in understanding events. This is generalized knowledge about the physical and social world, such as what kind of behavior to expect when dealing with different people and scenarios. So I think the easiest, at least for me, scenario to remember what schemas are is, how do you know to act differently in a five-star restaurant versus a McDonald's? How are you going to act differently in those two situations? How do you know? How do you, what is it that tells you that you are supposed to dress and act differently in those places? You're going to be surrounded by different people and you're going to be in a different scenario. How do you know to change your behavior? And it's a knowledge structure consisted of the stored information that you've gained throughout your life to understand how to act in different scenarios. And that is exactly what a schema is. And there's many other ways. You're going to act differently around your friends than you are around your teacher or around your parents. You're going to act differently, maybe from class to class. You're going to act differently, really in any different kind of situation. You might act differently with your boyfriend or girlfriend than you do with your family. But what is it that makes you realize that you need to act differently or you need to respond differently? Okay, another term is stereotypes. And there's going to be a whole chapter over stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination later in the semester. So stereotypes is a belief that certain attributes are characteristic of members of a particular group. Okay, so whenever we confront new stimuli, when we come into a new scenario, our brain processes the information that we come across. So the mind processes information in two ways when you encounter a social situation. There's automatic or non-conscious, and controlled or conscious. So automatic processing, or also known as non-conscious processing, occurs first and is often based on emotional factors. This occurs before conscious thought takes over. This gives rise to implicit attitudes and beliefs that can't readily be controlled by the conscious mind. So maybe whenever you encounter, maybe you go for a run. And I know, especially as a woman, I'm more cautious of maybe going for a run by myself at night. Maybe I won't do that because it's not safe. But let's say it's like 10 o'clock at night, it's dark outside, and I decided to go for a run. And all of a sudden, I see someone running towards me. And my first thought is, oh my gosh, this person is coming to take me. They're going to hurt me. That is my automatic thought. It is both based on emotional factors that, oh my gosh, I'm scared. I've seen this movie before. This occurs before conscious thought takes over. It can't be readily controlled by the mind. So I haven't had time to actually think. And this is just what my brain automatically does. Okay, so now let's go into controlled processing / conscious processing. So this occurs second and is controlled by deliberate thought. This is conscious and systematic thinking. It gives rise to explicit attitudes and beliefs. This is controlled and conscious processing. So while I may think that at night, when my emotions are when I'm already on high alert, my emotions are already heightened, I might think that any man running towards me is going to grab me and try to hurt me. Okay. But if and that's my automatic thought. Okay. But let's say I actually stop and think about it, even for 10 seconds. The likelihood of that person wanting to hurt me is very, very low. Second, I'm thinking, well, I'm out for a run. Maybe they're out for a run too. And they're just going in the opposite direction as I am. So I actually take time to think through these through the social situation. I'm going to encounter another person. What is going to happen? And it's usually not what I automatically thought was going to happen. So this is conscious thinking. And so this is where you kind of take control of your thoughts and kind of work through and say, no, this is probably what it actually is. Do I think that someone is actually going to do that to me? No, I don't think so. I think I'm safe. I'll keep running. Okay, next on to evolution in human behavior. So I think everyone has heard of natural selection. This is an evolutionary process that molds animals and plants so that traits that enhance the probability of survival and reproduction are passed on to subsequent generations. So in terms of social psychology, we say that disadvantageous characteristics are selected against and characteristics better adapted to the environment are selected for. So maybe that could be personality traits. Maybe that could be looks that are going to help you in social situations. Whatever the case may be, we want these advantageous characteristics that are going to help us be more likely to pass down our genes to be selected and passed down to our offspring. Parental investment. So it's another along the lines of evolution. This is the evolutionary principle that costs and benefits are associated with reproduction and the nurturing of offspring. So when you think of maybe not emotionally, but just think physically, who invests more into a child? When you think of male or female animals, you think the male has a part to play for sure, but then the female has to hold and carry their offspring for, it could be days, weeks, months, years. I think elephants are pregnant for 2 months, 2 years, I'm sorry. So there is more of an investment than the male does. So when we see in animals and in humans, it's more accepted. It's more likely that polygamy, which is one male and multiple females, is going to occur versus one one female and multiple males, which is polyandry, because when it comes to reproduction and offspring, it is much more costly for the female than it is for the male. And so that's where parental investment comes in, is the time and the energy and the physical effort. And therefore, a lot of times emotionally as well, it's a higher investment for the female than for the male. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the brain and how social psychology fits into how the brain works. So, evolutionary approaches to the study of social behavior tell us that everything humans do or thinks involves biological processes in the brain and body that have been shaped by natural selection. Social neuroscience is a new field that studies the neural processes that cause social behavior. And this is very difficult to study because the brain has over 100 billion neurons organized in over 50 distinct regions of the brain. But one way that these scientists are trying to discover more about this field is through the use of the functional MRI, the fMRI, because you can see different parts of the brain light up by whatever the brain is doing. Different regions of the brain are firing depending on what's going on. So we see here the amygdala right here in the brain is involved in gut feelings from stimuli we encounter in the environment. You know, those gut feelings that tell you maybe I should turn around and go home, or maybe this just doesn't feel right. I need to stop doing this, or I need to keep doing something because this is what's going to keep me safe. That is where those feelings come from. So you may say you feel it in your gut, but it's coming from your brain. It's coming from your amygdala. So maybe next time you say, I have an amygdala feeling, maybe not a gut feeling. That might sound a little too corny. Okay, next, the nucleus accumbens is rich with dopamine receptors and projects to the prefrontal cortex, where we process complex thoughts and emotions. So here we have the nucleus accumbens, and it projects dopamine to the prefrontal cortex. Dopamine is the ultimate pleasure neurotransmitter that makes us feel good. And then the prefrontal cortex is so important. This part of the brain is not fully developed until you're about 25, 26 years old. And the prefrontal cortex continues to thicken until you're into your mid 20s. And different regions of the prefrontal cortex are involved in self-awareness, moral judgment, decision-making, and very important things like that. So that's why whenever you're a teenager, maybe your body has started to develop some more, but your brain is not there yet. And so you're filled with all these hormones and big life things and breakups and friendship hurts and school and all these things. And so when your brain is not fully developed and you're not, when it comes to self-awareness, the prefrontal cortex is involved in self-awareness, judgment, decision-making. When those things aren't fully developed in your brain, everything feels like the end of the world. The slightest inconvenience or that breakup, which you look back on 10 years later and you're like, that was hardly anything. But at the time, it feels like the end of the world. And that's because your brain is not fully developed yet. That portion of your brain is still not there yet. So I've recently had a conversation with someone that thought that the legal age of drinking should be lowered to 18. I said, absolutely not. If anything, it should be raised. And I know that could be a controversial take, but when the brain is not fully developed until 25 or 26, and so you're giving alcohol to an 18-year-old who is 8 years away from their brain being fully developed, and you add alcohol to that when already the part of their brain that is involved in decision making isn't fully developed, I don't think that that's a very smart combination. So give that some thought, and know that most of you guys still have another 4 or 5 years till your brain is fully developed and you can make those big life decisions where you can see more than the next month or few months or a couple years ahead of you. You can take more into the future, into context, whenever you're making those decisions, because your brain can comprehend it a little bit more. Okay, culture and human behavior. An important legacy of evolution for human beings is the great flexibility it affords us for adaptation to different circumstances. This causes humans to be able to survive in every type of ecosystem. So there's different types of cultures that we're able to survive in socially, and it just the two main ones I'm going to break it down into that we'll talk about throughout the semester are independent or individualistic cultures and interdependent or collectivist cultures. So the independent cultures is a culture in which people tend to think of themselves as distinct social entities tied to each other by voluntary bonds of affection and organizational memberships, but essentially separate from other people and having attributes that exist in the absence of any connection to others. So a lot of westernized countries, such as the United States, are independent cultures that we want to be unique. We want to stand out. We are very much we live by our own failures and our own successes. However, a lot of Asian, African, and South American cultures are interdependent or collectivistic cultures. And these are cultures in which people tend to define themselves as part of a collective, inextricably tied to others in their group and placing less importance on individual freedom or personal control over their lives. They see themselves as part of a group that they all fail together or they all succeed together. And they care more about what others around them think because they all see themselves as part of this collective group. So given that, culture shapes our brains. During a study, people who were more independent showed denser gray matter in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which supports attention and thought about the self, and denser gray matter in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is thought to support thoughts of self-agency. So our brains literally change depending on what type of culture we are surrounded on, because our brains have to adapt to what's expected of us. And this is a little bit more of a breakdown on some differences between independent and interdependent cultures if you want to look over that. Okay, culture and gender roles. So male dominance is one of the most variable aspects of gender roles. Many Western cultures are relatively gender egalitarian, such as the United States. For example, in Sweden, nearly half the membership of parliament is women. Relative status of women in the rest of the world ranges from Scandinavian extreme of equality to near slavery conditions in other countries. So polygamy, which is one male, many women, and serial monogamy are the most common practices among cultures. So this is a question you can ask yourself, and maybe you'll gain some understanding of throughout the semester. Why are promiscuous women treated differently than promiscuous men? Why are gays and lesbians sentenced to prison in some countries and not others? What is the difference in those countries? What do they hold dear when we're talking about the social world? How is that different from culture to culture, country to country, and why is that? Okay, that is the end of chapter 1.